All right, we're going to keep going in part 2 here, which is going to be 5 meetings, a license, and a section of the Doctrine and Covenants. So we get 2 meetings here. One is in September and the other one's in October. So we'll start here. September of 1831. Meeting held in the morning because Joseph Smith's family was moving to Hiram. So just like today, like, hey, I got to pack a truck, I got to pack my wagon, I got to pack a horse and mule or whatever, and we're moving today. So let's do this pretty quickly. So I'll just read off the minutes of this because it's pretty short, but it says, upon sufficient or satisfactory testimony to this conference, it was voted that our brethren George Miller, a priest in the church of Shalersville, John Woodard, an elder in the church of Orange, and Benjamin Bragg, a priest in the church of Warrensville, be silenced from ministering in their respective offices. Oliver Cowdery, clerk of conference. And we get no detail about the heck was going on here. So that's all you get. So these 3 guys, it's like, hey guys, you don't get to be in your offices anymore. Like, give us your licenses back, you're done. Don't know what they did. Don't know why they did it. So I'm sorry, that's all we get from the Joseph Smith papers. October 1, 1831, we get another meeting, which is, just read the minutes off to you. Minutes of a conference held in Geauga County, Ohio, October 1, 1831. 9 elders present. The duty of the elders was declared by the Spirit to go forth and warn the inhabitants of the earth of the things known in the Church of Christ in these last days. Brother Joseph Coe and William W. Phelps were ordained to the high priesthood under the hand of Brother Joseph Smith, Jr., William W. Phelps, clerk of conference. Very simple calling and training for their missions. So congratulations, Joseph Coe and William Phelps. They were made high priests, and they got their commissions to go. So very simple calling. So yeah, like I said, we're going to barrel through these. Not a whole lot to be said here about these meetings because the minutes are all you get. And unless somebody else put it in a journal or some other publication, we don't really have anything for them. We then get William Smith's license. Now, William Smith is a brother to Joseph, and it says, and this is an interesting one. This is still held, as far as I can tell, by the Community of Christ. So what you're going to see here on this image that I have is that there's a watermark that I've kept here on purpose for the Community of Christ and giving them the credit for or keeping this and preserving this so well like they do. They're very, very good at this. So this is a paper that had become weakened over the years, separated at the folds, and pasted onto another piece of paper, basically, which is, it happens, like having the same piece of paper. We don't really know if there's anything on the back side of this thing because it was kind of pasted onto this other piece of paper to keep it together, and so we don't really know what's there anymore. But we do get a source note for this from the Joseph Smith papers. It says, the license was received by the RLDS Church, now Community of Christ, in July of 1965. The document passed from William Smith to Isaac Sheen, an early supporter to William Smith's later claims to lead the church. Sheen gave the certificate to his son, who gave it to his brother-in-law, Oliver Ira Babbitt. Babbitt presented this certificate with other books to his friend Alvin Smith of Miami, Oklahoma, who gave them to his daughter. She, in turn, donated them to the RLDS Church. So, for all the hands that it passed through, everybody did a fantastic job keeping this one together, I think, all things considered. So, what's the content? It's very brief. It says, this is to certify that William Smith has been received in this Church of Christ according to the Articles and Covenants of this church, and ordained a teacher under the hand of Joseph Smith, Jr. This, therefore, authorizes him to act as a teacher in this church according to the Articles and Covenants given at Hiram, October 5th, 1831, John Whitmer, Joseph Smith, Jr., elders. So this is a license of a teacher. Now, just to clarify for those of you who may not know, there is an office in the Aaronic priesthood called teacher. So it goes deacon, teacher, priest, and then in the Melchizedek priesthood, you have a lot of things. You have elder, high priest, apostle, 70, patriarch. These are all offices in the priesthood. But anyway, so that's what he's referring to. Not just teaching stuff, but actually the office of a teacher. So from the historical introduction from this, we get William Smith held the office of teacher by at least 3rd of June, 1831. The issuance of the license in October may have been necessary because, as Smith later remembered, he was exclusively engaged in the business of my office at that time. This involvement included, quote, attending the numerous conferences and visiting the branches to see that the members were all faithful and that there was no quarreling or backbiting among the brethren, unquote. It is possible, though less likely, that Smith obtained a license at the time for his ordination and received this 5th October 1831 license as a replacement or renewal of the original. John Whitmer, who was assigned to historical and clerical responsibilities, wrote out the license, which he and Joseph Smith signed as elders. So sometimes you lose your recommend, as we say in today's church. But I will say, as of this moment, the renewals of that might come to an end, because now we're thinking of doing all these licenses and whatnot, our recommends, as we say, digitally. So, things evolve, things change. We'll see how that goes. But for many, many years, there's been a piece of paper that kind of says I'm authorized to do stuff for the church. So after that, we get 3 meetings. And I'm going to go through some of their minutes here. And like I said, in the future, I may not dive too much into this, because there's going to be a lot more record keeping and a lot less revelations. And I'm kind of constraining myself to the things that people are a lot more familiar with and filling in the history for those. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But for now, we're going to be exploring Minute Book 2, first meeting that we have from October 11th, 1831. Certain points were discussed by Brother Joseph Smith, Jr., who said that the elders present were to tarry until the morrow and hold a meeting, so that the members might understand the ancient manner of conducting meetings as they were led by the Holy Ghost. Also said that this was not perfectly known by many of the elders of this church. Exhortation by Brother William W. Phelps, Brother Oliver Cowdery, then made a move that this conference take into consideration the propriety of appointing 6 elders to visit the several branches of this church, setting them in order, and also make known the situation of Brothers Joseph Smith, Jr. and Sidney Rigdon, and accordingly Brothers David Whitmer and Reynolds Cahoon were chosen, appointed. The other 4 remained to be chosen hereafter. It was decided by vote that the General Conference meet on the 25th instant at the dwelling house of Brother Serenys Burnett in Orange, Cayuga County. Brothers David and Reynolds were then ordained to their office or appointment, and Brother Stephen Burnett an elder under the hands of John Whitmer. Conference closed in prayer by Joseph Smith, Jr. So footnote 3 to this, I think, is kind of funny. I don't know why I think it's funny, but I just thought it was funny. It says, Serenys Burnett's home may have been volunteered for the forthcoming conference by his son, Stephen Burnett, who was also present at the conference. So I love this idea of like, well, we need to meet. Where should we go? And he's like, you can use my house if you want. And they say, okay. And so a general conference of the church is held in this guy's house. And I just think that's funny. So a little further into this, Right, so the historical introduction gives us this. The conference dealt with other practical matters as well, including ordinations, the scheduling of a general conference to be held later in the month, and the need for funds to support Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon and their families so that they could resume the work of Bible revision. Joseph Smith's later history explains that this 11 October meeting occurred when Joseph Smith was recommencing the translation of the scriptures in Hiram, with Rigdon as his scribe. Although both were staying in the Johnsons' farm and therefore had room and board provided, they apparently needed means so that they could devote themselves full time to this effort. So the purpose of this meeting is a little peculiar. I can say words. Anyway, further into this historical introduction. Despite these pressing practical concerns, the conference opened with general instruction, including direction on the subject of conducting meetings, a topic on which Joseph Smith believed the elders needed additional instructions. Most were ignorant of the, quote, ancient manner of conducting meetings, unquote. A later Joseph Smith journal history explains, even though members had been counseled to direct meetings, quote, as they were led by the Holy Ghost. Although some instruction occurred in this one-day conference, the minutes mentioned a meeting for the following day to continue the discussion and apply the principles. So how do you run a meeting? What does it mean to run a meeting by the Spirit? I guess that was all part of this conference training that they did. So that's that. The 21st of October, 1831, there's another meeting about how William Cahoon, a 17-year-old at the time, quote, offered abuse to a 6-year-old by the name of Sarah Ann Whitney. Apparently, they tried to reconcile the issue, little is known about it, and that it was not satisfactory. So this meeting was held to deal with the situation, unknown what Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon decided to do with it. It's kind of weird. So the content of it is this. Prayer by Sidney Rigdon who called in question the case of two brothers, William Cahoon and Peter DeVolve, who were accused of some of their brethren of offering abuse to Brother Neil K. Whitney's little child. Brother Frederick G. Williams arose and said that he was at a meeting with the Kirtland brethren when Brother William Cahoon was present, who spoke at a considerable length by the Spirit of the Lord, as he supposed. And also Brother Peter DeVolve declared that he was filled with the Spirit of God, but had confessed previous that he did offer abuse to the child, but not to the satisfaction of their parents. Therefore, voted by this conference that it is their undoubted opinion, taking into consideration the testimony before them, it is therefore voted at this conference, send our beloved brethren Joseph Smith, Jr. and Sidney Rigdon unto the church in Kirtland to lay before them the decision of this conference. Call before them these two brethren, cause them to make sufficient acknowledgement of their sins, or be dealt with according to the law of this church. Closed in prayer by Joseph Smith, Jr. And that's really all we get. I'm not sure what the abuse was. Apparently they said it out loud in this meeting, but that didn't satisfy the parents, and so it became a huge problem, and that was that. So footnote 1 to this says, here, a portion of text recording the decision of the conference appears to be missing, probably because of a scribal error. So yeah, sometimes you just don't write it down. So I have no idea what this means, but a 17-year-old and another guy, I guess, offered abuse, whatever that means, to a little girl, and consternation ensued, and there was conferences held and all sorts of stuff. So back at this time, I guess one of the points of this whole thing is that the church was still pretty small, and so they could deal with these little tiffs amongst themselves. That is far from the truth today. Most people will never even come into any sort of close contact with a leader at this time. I mean, there's one for every million of us, so it's just not a thing we do anymore. But yeah, that's a weird conference, in my opinion. After this, we get an October 25th and 26th conference of the church. So over 2 days. And there's a lot of really fun stuff in here. It's kind of a long minute, so I'm going to break it down just a little bit here. But the historical introduction gives us this. This was the first general conference since members of the church had been ordained to the high priesthood in June 1831. And it provided an opportunity for Joseph Smith and Rigdon to offer instructions concerning the power of that priesthood. Minutes of the June 1831 meeting do not provide much information about what was said to those ordained to the high priesthood, making it difficult to assess how the ordination was understood at that time. But Levi Hancock, who was present at the June conference, later recalled a conversation he had in January 1832 with Lyman White, who ordained several individuals to the high priesthood at the June conference. Speaking about the priesthood, Hancock remarked that neither of us understood what it was. I did not understand it, wrote Hancock, and he, White, could give me no light. Let's be honest. Great, you've ordained me to the high priesthood. I have no idea what this means, And to be honest with you, I think that's true even today. We can talk about how organized everything is. But, new babies are born, and those babies need to be taught, right? And so the training has to happen. This, by the way, in my opinion, is one of the reasons why the church has changed its organization to the Aaronic priesthood is almost entirely for young men, or maybe new converts, but it's really for young men, and to prepare them so that when they do get the higher priesthood, the Melchizedek priesthood, that they've had some experience with it already. So, but yeah, when the church is new, this is what you get. So I thought that was honest and kind of fun. So there is a section where individuals proclaim their commitment to the work of the Lord. So we get this from the historical introduction. The minutes suggest that willingness to relinquish all to God may have been a requirement to obtain the high priesthood and its power to, quote, seal up the saints unto eternal life. Accordingly, some participants in the 25th, 26th October conference made or renewed a covenant to consecrate all to God. Nearly all who did so had been previously ordained to the high priesthood or were ordained at the conference. Okay, I'm going to give you some portions of this, starting here. Prayer by Brother Simeon Carter, glorious things were then sung. Brother Sidney Rigdon arose and said that he wished to make a few observations connected with the object of our assembling ourselves together. When God works, all may know it, for he always answers the prayers of the Savior, for he makes his children one. For he, by his Holy Spirit, binds their hearts from earth to heaven. And in this thing God has had taught his children to sing a new song, even about Zion, which David spoke of, etc. God always bears testimony by his presence in counsel to his elders when they assemble themselves in perfect faith and humble themselves before the Lord, and their wills being swallowed up in the will of God. So, going back to the beginning of this, it says, glorious things were then sung. Footnote 3 to this says, probably the traditional hymn, glorious things of thee are spoken. The conference held in Missouri on the 4th of August, 1831, also opened by singing this hymn. So I'm going to be generous here and say maybe the singing was glorious, but the title of the song was also Glorious Things. So, just to kind of clarify that. So yeah, a very interesting conference, and I would say very good counsel by Brother Rigdon about, if you come with the proper intent, the Lord will bless your efforts if you're elders in the church. So Joseph Smith gives a speech. So I'm going to quote this one here. It says, Brother Joseph Smith Jr. said, we have assembled together to do the business of the Lord, and it is through the great mercy of our God that we are spared to assemble together. Many of us have went at the command of the Lord in defiance of every evil thing, and obtained blessings unspeakable, in consequence of which our names are sealed in the Lamb's book of life. For the Lord hath spoken it. It is the privilege of every elder to speak of the things of God, etc. And could we all come together with one heart and one mind in perfect faith, the veil might as well be rent today as next week or any other time. And if we will but cleanse ourselves and covenant before God to serve him, it is our privilege to have an assurance that God will protect us at all times. So there you go. Topics were then introduced. John Whitmer was concerned that portions of the Articles and Covenants were not being respected, for example. Frederick G. Williams gets up, wanted to know about migrating families and how to care for them properly. Sidney Rigdon said that this people was meant to be sealed up to God. And then we get this. Brother Joseph Smith Jr. said that the order of the high priesthood is that they have power given them to seal up the saints unto eternal life, and said it was the privilege of every elder present to be ordained to the high priesthood. So I guess the intention is that all of them were supposed to eventually get to that point, which I would say is culturally true inside of the church today. Like, if you live in the church for long enough, just by virtue of your age, you're made a high priest eventually. So that may have changed recently with the abolishment of the high priest groups in each ward, but that's what the culture's been for a long time. So there you go. The ordained priesthood then sort of announced or reiterated their decision to the work, each in their turn. So a lot of them you'll see here in the document, like it's just, so-and-so gets up and says he's, willing to do things and so forth and so on. It just goes on and on like this for a while. So lest I be repetitive, I'm not going to read all those out to you, but each one of these men get up and sort of proclaims or maybe confirms their dedication to this work that they're a part of. There's a quote here that I wanted to bring up I thought was very interesting. Brother Hiram Smith said that he thought best that the information of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon be related by Joseph himself to the elders present, that all might know for themselves. Brother Joseph Smith Jr. said that it was not intended to tell the world all the particulars of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, and also said that it was not expedient for him to relate these things, etc. So Hiram Smith, who's like such a favorite child in church history, kind of says, hey, Joseph, why don't you tell us about the Book of Mormon? And he says, no. So there you go. What I find funny is that we start off with that now in modern church teaching. Like we'll start off with like the first vision and the coming forth of the Book of Mormon. So I guess in a way we've gone against this little, the meetings of this, the minutes of this meeting rather. Anyway, but just kind of a funny little, I guess the brothers did not agree here in this moment. So the evening session ended with a call to help with a revision of the Bible. Quote, the clerk begged the privilege of laying before the conference in the evening the necessity of sending certain elders to visit the churches and obtain means for the support of Brother Joseph Smith Jr. and those appointed to assist him in writing copying the fullness of the scriptures, as was concluded upon in a conference held in Hiram, October 11th, 1831. So that's the end of the day. And they said, we need to go around and gather up some money so that Joseph and Sidney Rigdon can finish what they call the fullness of the scriptures, which is sort of the revision of the Bible, the Old Testament, New Testament, what we now call the Joseph Smith translation. So next morning comes around and they agree to do just that. We get this, quote, Brothers Orson Hyde, Simeon Carter, Emer Harris, and Hiram Smith were appointed and ordained agreeably to a motion of the clerk to visit the churches agreeably to the conference. Agreeably. The day ends with various people being ordained to offices in the priesthood, or advanced, as we would like to say today. Some rebukes are doled out about indifference to the offices they were ordained to, and certain brethren actually said, I hear you, and I accept that. I accept that rebuke. We're not doing what we should. Interesting. That's done in the conference. Oliver Cowdery mentions the need to find the 12 apostles. So this is going back a couple of months now, and they still haven't quite done that yet. But it says something here that's interesting. Quote, be ordained and sent forth from the land of Zion, implying that knowing the site of Zion was an important launching point for the calling of the 12. So I find that interesting, is that this edict that they had, like the 3 witnesses to the Book of Mormon, you need to go out and find the 12 apostles. Apparently in this meeting, Oliver says, we now know where Zion is, so now we can do this job again. So they've been kind of putting it off for a little bit. So that's all the stuff. We're going to conclude with what we're used to, which is a section from the Doctrine and Covenants. So this is section 66. So we're out of order here, but bear with me. I'm going to go in the order that the Joseph Smith Papers puts them in. So the first copy of this one is actually on 2 loose pages in the back of William McClellan's notebook. It's the earliest copy that we have. And we're not quite sure if it was sewn in or if it was jammed in there, but like it was just found in his notebook. It is in the handwriting of William E. McClellan. And the wear marks kind of make it impossible to know what the actual relationship was to the book, where it was torn out or just placed in there. But we get this from the source note. It says, the notebook containing the revelation, along with other William E. McClellan documents, was apparently inherited by McClellan's widow, Emmeline Miller McClellan, who gave the documents to J.L. Tauber, Jr. of, I think it's Duquette, Texas. Tauber apparently acquired these items in 1884, when he also obtained a copy of the Book of Commandments from McClellan's widow. Tauber sold the documents to the LDS Church in 1908. These documents were kept in the vault of the church's first presidency until 1986, when they were loaned to the Historical Department, now the Church History Department, and later custody was permanently transferred to the Church History Library. And I think I've said this before, but it used to be that the first presidencies sort of had their own vault of documents, and there was an archive in the basement of the Salt Lake Temple. Those have all been moved to a specifically designed building called the Church History Library, and there they sit to this day. And some of them were kind of moved over and kind of like, okay, these still belong to the first presidency, but you can have them. But I would say, coincidentally, around the time the Joseph Smith Papers happened, a lot of stuff was permanently held over there and is kept very professionally. These documents are kept very well. A copy of this is also found in Revelation Book 1. There's not a big fanfare of an introduction to this. It's actually quite small writing. They didn't do big flourishing, whatever. We do get some verse numbering from W.W. Phelps. The last name of Samuel H. Smith is written in the hand of Joseph Smith, which is kind of fun. And then we get some grammatical changes by John Whitmer. It's also in Revelation Book 2, and there are no corrections here at all. So Revelation 2 is a really clean copy, and that's in the handwriting of Frederick G. Williams. We are done with the Book of Commandments, so nothing more in that book. So just, again, thank you for your service there. It is section 74 in the Doctrine and Covenants from 1835, and a copy is found in the manuscript history of the church. Those are the contemporary documents from Joseph's life that we have. So let's get into an introduction into the content itself. So section 66. For starters, it comes before section 65, but whatever. We don't get anything from William E. McClellan's notebook papers, and it could have been something was lost, but there is no introduction at all. Revelation Book 1 gives us a revelation to William E. McClellan received October 29th, 1831. Very simple. Revelation Book 2 gives us about the same thing. It says, Revelation, to William E. McClellan, October 1831. We get a lot more from the manuscript history, which gives a brief summary of the conference we just talked about, and then gives us this. It says, at the conference on the 25th at Orange, 12 high priests, 17 elders, 4 priests, 3 teachers, and 4 deacons, together with a large congregation, attended. Much business was done, and the 4 remaining committee, authorized by the conference at Hiram on the 11th, were appointed and consisted of Simeon Carter, Orson Hyde, Hiram Smith, and Emer Harris. At the request of William E. McClellan, I inquired of the Lord and received the following revelation given October 1831. So this was a requested revelation from the prophet. So that's contemporary. So the historical introduction to Volume 1 of the document series says, on 29th of October 1831, William E. McClellan wrote in his journal, the Lord condescended to hear my prayer and give me a revelation of his will through his prophet or seer, Joseph. McClellan, a recent convert from Paris, Illinois, met Joseph Smith for the first time at the 25th-26th October conference in Orange, Cayuga County, Ohio, where McClellan was ordained to the high priesthood. At the conclusion of the conference, he accompanied Joseph Smith to Hiram, Ohio, arriving there on the 29th of October. McClellan later recalled that on that day, he went before the Lord in secret, and on my knees asked him to reveal the answer to 5 questions through his prophet. At McClellan's request, Joseph Smith dictated a revelation for him, perhaps in the southeast upstairs bedroom of the John and Alice, or Elsa, Jacobs, Johnson home. So at McClellan's request, Joseph Smith dictated a revelation for him, perhaps in the southeast upstairs bedroom of the John and Alice Johnson home, where Joseph Smith worked on his revision of the Bible. According to McClellan, a revelation answered the questions, quote, to my full and entire satisfaction, unquote. Although McClellan never explained what his 5 queries were, the revelation's contents indicate that he was probably concerned about his standing before God and what the Lord desired him to do. I really, really wish we knew what those 5 questions were. I think that would be kind of fun. But he had 5 questions, and those 5 were answered, apparently. So that's kind of fun. Footnote 5 to this says, from the historical introduction, by the way, this translating room was the largest room upstairs and probably originally the bedroom of John and Alice Jacob Johnson. The Johnsons created a new bedroom by partitioning off a single large workspace on the west end of the 2nd floor into 2 smaller rooms. While Joseph Smith was attending the October conference in Orange, much of the work was done by the time Joseph Smith and McClellan reached the Johnson home on the 29th of October. But the partition wall was not plastered until that evening. When you can get down to the point where you know when the plaster was drying, that's some pretty impressive historical stuff there. So whoever said that, whoever found that, Joseph Smith Papers people, my hat's off to you. So this was written here and in a journal, and some additions were made to the end. So from the historical introduction again, it says the notebook version also appears to be more complete than the copy in Revelation Book 1 because the notebook contains an endnote regarding McClellan belonging to the lineage of Ephraim in the Old Testament, a note that also appears in the journal copy. So from the text of this is what you get. A revelation given to William E. McClellan, a true descendant from Joseph, who was sold into Egypt, down through the loins of Ephraim his son. And I spoke about this in a previous part, but yeah, this Ephraim tribe had the promise, and this is from Deuteronomy, and also the blessings of Abraham to his children, Israel to his children, that Ephraim would be the one that would sort of push them back. And you get that language a lot, pushing them to Zion, pushing them to the temple. That is the job of Ephraim, even though those tribes had some intertribal warfare, but that's the promise. So you hear that a lot in church literature. So let's get a little bit of the content footnotes here. We get this from the text. It says, behold, verily I say unto you that it is my will that you should proclaim my gospel from land to land and from city to city, yea, in those regions round about where it hath not been proclaimed. Tarry not many days in this place. Go not up unto the land of Zion as yet, but inasmuch as you can send. Otherwise, think not of thy property. Go unto eastern lands, bear testimony in every place, unto every people in their synagogues, reasoning with the people. And just as a clarification here, the synagogue idea is not like a Jewish synagogue. It was meant as like a general place of gathering. Although they probably wouldn't have shied away from it. But, the synagogue idea is like this would have been like a church or a chapel, wherever it may be. Footnote 5 to this says, according to McClellan, I had expected to remain here and read and write for some weeks and probably months, but having received the will of the Lord, I determined to obey it. Therefore, McClellan continued, I only remained here in Hiram about 3 weeks. So he was like, hey, I'm going to stay here. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to leave in 3 weeks. So, and such it is in the early church. They were bouncing all over the place sometimes. We get a little further into the text. It says, seek not to be cumbered, forsake all unrighteousness, commit not adultery, a temptation with which thou hast been troubled. Footnote 13 is very interesting for this. It says, exactly how McClellan had been tempted with adultery is unclear. His wife, Cynthia Ann, whom he married in 1829, had died recently, leaving McClellan to experience, quote, many lonesome and sorrowful hours. So, and just as a reminder, this is 1831, so they were married for 2 years before she died, probably less than that. And so he was in mourning, but for some reason that was considered, I guess, a temptation for him. Not really sure where that comes from. And that's all we get from section 66, and that is the end of part 2. So thanks for sticking with us. We have one more part. The only thing we're going to do with it is section 65, so stick with us, and we'll finish this up.